the greatest family in the history of wrestling.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Oscar Buzz. Trevor here, joined by Sam, and today we're talking about Sean Durkin's The Iron Claw. So this is a biographical film about the Von Erich brothers and their dad, family of wrestlers. We got Zac Efron, we got Jeremy Allen White, we got Harris Dickinson, and then also
Boys of the Month.
Yeah. Well, Zac Efron was a White Boy of the Month like 8 years ago, but
yeah, now he's come back to be the White
and
Boy.
now he's back. Mara Tierney's also here. She's excellent. Holt McCallany, I think that's also excellent. Lily James is also in this a bit. Stanley Salmon's very, very strong ensemble cast. So yeah, this really took me by surprise. I'm very unfamiliar with the world of wrestling. Knew absolutely nothing about the Von Erich family except for that Sean Durkin was making the film about them before going into it, and I was really, really kind of blown away by this.
Yeah, I didn't think I would like it either. Nothing about this movie seemed appealing.
I thought it was gonna be a Wikipedia biopic.
Yeah, but it's actually it did something that I didn't expect it to, which is transcend the trauma porn type of kind of convention and turn into something quite beautiful and very nuanced. So that's kind of what took me by surprise the most. How you have an incredibly delicate and deliberate exploration of masculinity, and we examine a family that is well known depending on where you are. Where I live, not a well-known group of people. That's not something that I knew about prior to watching the movie. But New York isn't. I don't really associate New York with Americana. And
no, I'm in the middle of Illinois. So my dad was very. I went and saw the film with my dad. He was very familiar with it.
Exactly.
I just did not.
My parents don't really know much about.
Yeah. But I'm definitely more in the type of space. I'm not in the South Midwest where you get even more with Americana, but definitely more on that space.
Yeah.
But I think for that reason, I absolutely love seeing Americana explored on film. I think that Kelly Reichardt does it excellently in a lot of her work, and she's one of my favorite filmmakers, just working right now and also ever. Yeah, shocking. But no, I love that exploration of American culture, and just really how it intertwines with the exploration of masculinity here. And we will be talking about spoilers because it's history spoilers, really. It's history spoilers. What do you want?
It's not the kind of movie that you go into wondering what's gonna happen next. It's not that kind of movie. You watch it more for the feeling and the emotional journey and the character development, which isn't something you can really spoil. It's more of something you experience.
It's an experience. But if you're unfamiliar with the story and you want to go in spoiler free, then come back.
Bye.
But no, so
back later.
I think I wrote about this a little bit on Letterboxd, and I want to kind of dive further into it because I think American culture when explored on film is so interesting, and just in general American culture I find very interesting because it's so intangible. American culture really is just it kind of doesn't exist, but it's also everything. It's just this melting pot of all of these other cultures that are kind of funneled into one.
Not a melting pot, only a melting pot because it exists in the same country, but it's so specific by the area that you're in.
Yeah,
it's not really a melting pot.
Right, and it's so bizarre. I find American culture. And so it's looking at those intangibilities of American culture and Americana and how hard it is to have a clearly defined culture, really, because in reality, culture is built out of oppression, which is why you see different marginalized groups have a stronger culture than the generalized population, right? You see different racial minorities, for people, there's a strong sense of culture and identity within that, but just as far as generalized culture, and it's hard to find an identity within that because white people in America, particularly white men, don't face as much oppression, but then that can lead to a lot of identity crisis. And that's why, I think for a lot of men, mental health is really poor because there isn't a space of association. And obviously oh, poor them, they don't have as much oppression, but I think that it is like this really delicate balance, and I think that Ironclad dives into all of that excellently in looking at like, like male mental health and mental health with men and all of that within this Americana place where it feels like you have a culture while also it's like this illusion of culture where you really actually have nothing to identify with beyond the products and commodification of what you're doing. And when your culture is purely based off of product and commodification and how you're able to sell yourself or what you're able to buy, then that is so quickly able to be taken away from you under a capitalist system where there's always something that is going to be better and able to make more money, which I think we see with their wrestling ring, right? Like their identity was all built through their company, this thing that they were able to sell to people. And the dad freaked out when that was going to be taken away from him because he didn't have an identity beyond what he was able to sell people, and how he was able to sell himself in his body. And I think that was like, something terrifying for him to confront his kind of shocking lack of identity and lack of sense of self. And I think that that's really the crux of the film, and what a lot of the film's ideas are founded on is really those ideas of identity. And I think exploring that through wrestling, which is itself a blur of reality and fiction, where it feels like it can be both at the same time. And like it's all choreographed, but these people are actually putting their bodies through these things, right? And like it's fake, but it's very real at the same time. And I just think that that is an absolutely brilliant way of articulating those ideas.
Mm-hmm. And I think that as you mentioned, the father, I think that was my favorite area of this film's exploration of masculinity, because in a lot of dramas about Americana or about movies about artists or, sports players, athletes, I think that the films tend to really make the relationship between the father, especially movies about men, incredibly melodramatic and intense and overdrawn. And even though what the father says in this film will shock you and is appalling in many ways, the film doesn't play it out in a way that it's appearing to make you want to feel that way. It says it quite subtly with no tonal shift.
And it's done through the performance. Like the direction is completely different, but the performance. And I initially wasn't on board with the performance because it felt like he was in a different movie. And at a certain point, I was like,
no.
That's the point.
I think he was incredibly.
Yeah, like the point is that he's supposed to feel distant and disassociated from the rest of the performance.
There was something so cold, but also so like singular about his performance, because he really played it in a way that, as you said, it feels like it's in a different movie. There's no dynamic aspect to this character. His mindset is so fixed, and he plays it like that. And that's why it was probably jarring for you at first, because you were probably like, why is he wooden? But the intentional, it's very well done. And
it felt like he was his wrestling character.
It made it more terrifying than if the movie had over dramatized those moments and drawn it out, because by showing it in an incredibly natural and regard where you don't really question it, it makes it more internalized and more subconscious and more normal, which is why it's scarier. And that was like my favorite aspect of the film thematically, because it was just so it's something that you could miss, but the way that I've been interpreting it gets scarier and the more that I think about it.
Well, something that I was just thinking, like it really does feel like he's in his wrestling character almost the entire time, and like he's performing like a wrestling promo or something, right? And I think that really does link back to the idea that all of his identity is wrapped up in how he can sell himself. Like it feels like he isn't a real person outside of wrestling, outside of how he can like feel like he can craft this character to get more and more people to support him and get him up to the belt, get him up to be world champion, right? And it's just like it's genuinely like a mental illness. Like it's broken his brain to the point where it's like he's turned into this caricature of himself. And I think the performance is really, really stunning. In the way that honestly,
I think he should get nominated for it.
Yeah, and not a lot of people are talking about his work, but like it's really incredible. My favorite performance subtly.
I understand why Zac Efron.
I mean, Efron, the physicality of Efron's performance.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and also it's a very different role for him. But in terms of what role, like I'm gonna remember the most, it is the father. Like that for me was the most surprising, and also the mother. Small role. But there are some
Martina,
scenes where she's by herself
when
and
she
she just
looked at
takes
the
a look.
dress, when she looked at the dress and couldn't put on the dress the second time, it absolutely broke me because it just it's devastating to just like that. And I don't know. I love how this film, like I love a biopic that can just strip back and let images speak and doesn't necessarily have to tell you like one thing that
Priscilla did
really
the same thing.
right. That's why I adore Priscilla, right? And like
A24 is killing it. Like
okay, well I don't like the idea of homogenizing everything of like this is the A24 movies.
Sorry, I was trying to be nice. I was trying to be complimentary.
So I one moment in particular that really stuck out to me though was I think it's the moment where like one of the brothers I can't remember which one. I want to say it was Harris Dickinson, whichever might one of them. They're having like a big fight in like the Cotton Bowl or whatever, right? And we just see it on the TV and we just see the mom watching it, and then the audio of like the TV announcer right carries on, and then it just like rests on like the sun setting outside of their house. And I think that's really indicative of where the film's focus lies. It isn't about the big moments. It isn't about their wrestling career because that's what their dad wants it to be about. And at the beginning, when the dad has more control over them, we focus more on the wrestling, right? But as they grow up and their dad becomes less and less a part of their life, the focus shifts about what the brothers really want their relationship to be, which is about them. And every single time the father inserts himself is when one of the brothers, their mental health begins to deteriorate, when they, begin to make irrational decisions, which eventually leads to their deaths. And I think formally it's such an interesting way to explore it and how it becomes less and less about wrestling as it goes on. And I think that's very, very intentional. Because you kind of mentioned about like films about artists and athletes.
And that's also how it should be. It shouldn't focus on the actual action. It should focus on the characters always. That's always how it should be.
Because as you said with like artists and athletes, right? And like with films about those, particularly biopics, it focuses a lot on the big moments because those are supposed to feel like triumphs. But there aren't a lot of triumphs in the story.
No,
there are
like none actually.
Superficially like triumphs. But they aren't really triumphs because in the grand scheme of thing, even when they win, they are internally losing. And I think that we see that as they slowly, like the brothers slowly just begin to die, and I think each one is more devastating than the last. Like it could feel cheap, like okay, and then they're gonna die, and they're gonna, and it could feel so melodramatic. But again, I think it's the idea that like we never see it. We just like except for
and also the film doesn't have intense music or close-ups or zooming in and out. It's
really stripped back,
presented so flatly, but in a flat way. Like I don't mean that in like boring. I mean like very straightforward and deliberate.
It's very like it doesn't delve into subjectivity a lot until the very end, which I think is what makes it so powerful, because so much of the film is framed very directly through objective lenses until we get to this final sequence, which we'll talk about, which is where after Carrie Jeremiah White character, after he kills himself, we see him like reunite with his brothers and like go across this boat, right? And some people have called it like cheesy or whatever, but like I think it destroyed me. I think it really nails down like the heart of the film. I think that really is what the film is, because again, it isn't about the wrestling. It really is just about these brothers and their family, and it's almost like the Shakespearean tale and the Shakespearean tragedy about them. And that's what's really valuable to the film, and the fact that we stay so objective and we say stay so like as you said, like kind of like flat, blunt with like how it's shot, to the point where we really get this like really warm lighting in this hyper subjective sequence. I think that's what makes it so powerful at the end.
You mentioned something about like how the perspective and the objectivity of the film, and how like for maybe 2 hours of this movie until that scene, it is told objectively. Like when the father says something insane, when these people are dying, it's presented in the same way. We don't like really focus on one. We don't really have a traditional like melodrama or even just classic like American drama film where you like center on one character and exhibit how that person is feeling. It's much more about the state of the family. There's much more of a generality there. But then at the end, and specifically the final scene when Zac Efron's character, is with his two sons and they're like, we could be your brothers. Like that scene hit way more emotionally, and because of the fact that no other scene in the movie showed perspective in the way that it did there. And was what made me cry.
Yeah, no, and I think that Lily James' work as Pam is like works as a really good surrogate to kind of view that objective lens. So yeah, no, I think it's just really excellent across the board. I mean, to just talk about the rest of the stuff briefly, like Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, Harris Dickinson, who are the three leads, like they are all excellent, like amazing physical performances.
Yeah,
like
they're all
I mean,
great.
also like the stunt choreography here for all the wrestling stuff, incredible. And the fact, so I also read, so they didn't film it in like short broken up takes. What they did is they just every single wrestling sequence in this was filmed as one long take with a multicam setup and a live audience.
Okay, interesting. That's smart.
Which I think is really cool because it feels far more authentic that way. And like, and it's, I know, I think that this film also, it so deeply commits to that tone of wrestling and the fact that it plays out like that, and that they put on like the 80s like graphics sometimes over the screen of like showing it, like it so heavily commits to that tone. And I think, you know, it could have felt out of place, or it could have felt like a bit like, you know, tone deaf or whatever, but it really through and through feels like a Texas Americana like drama, and it just like it's so deeply and thoroughly in and out commits to that tone that nothing does really feel out of place.
But it also criticizes that culture.
Exactly.
It doesn't, you know, breathe it in. It doesn't try and make it glossy.
Again, it feels very dirty. It feels very dirty and very objective.
Call it dirty, but I would just call it blunt. There's something.
Yeah. I mean, I guess dirty in the sense of like it feels gritty. It feels very grounded. Nothing feels like over the top, right? Like
not at all.
Which I think is really, really I feel like I've been saying the same thing, but it's just an excellent film. It really blew me away. I wasn't expecting to love this, but it really transcended the Wikipedia biopic thing because it had a purpose. Like it really had a purpose. It had an identity. It had it wanted to tell this Shakespearean tragedy of the brothers, and it never strayed from that really thematic goal. It knew exactly what it wanted to be, and I think it's the best possible way to tell the story, and it executed it pretty near perfectly. So yeah, absolutely love this. I'm giving this a 9 out of 10.
I'm giving it a high 8.
All right, well, can't win them all.
Could be a 9 out rewatch. I actually wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, no, it's really great. It's a really great film. Watch it if you haven't. I mean, we've talked spoilers a lot, but you know, watch it. Anyways, those are our thoughts on the Iron Claw. Thank you everybody for watching. Also, Zac Efron should get a Best Acting nomination. Just gonna throw that out there, and I hope he does. But yes, thank you everybody for watching. And you can stay tuned for a lot more reviews. We're gonna do a lot more reviews over the next couple of weeks, and then our end of the year lists and our personal awards, all that fun stuff. But until then,
come out again when we want to release them.
Yes, not right at the end of the year, because again, I have a lot more I have like 30 more things I want to catch up on. My goal is to hit 200 new releases on the year. So
yeah, I can't quite do that or even promise anything remotely close to that, but I will see more movies and have a top 10 that I think will please Trevor slightly more than mine right now.
Okay, well, this isn't about pleasing me, but thank you everybody for watching. And we will see you guys soon. Until then, stay safe, everybody, and goodbye.